Sean Diddy Combs was convicted on 2 federal charges, each carrying up to 10 years in prison. But now, in a twist maybe no one saw coming, reports say President Donald Trump's team has been in talks with Diddy's lawyers about a possible presidential pardon. Could Trump really set Diddy free? Is this justice, politics, maybe payback? Oh, and by the way, Combs' team just filed papers to have his conviction thrown out and that he be granted a new trial, making a lot of arguments, including that he's protected by the First Amendment?
Nobody saw this coming. 1 minute, Diddy was a convicted man serving his sentence behind locked doors, buried under scandal, stripped of power, legacy crumbling. The next, his name was back in the headlines. Not because of another exposé, but because someone unexpected had stepped up to the plate.
Of testimony and a verdict that ended in Sean Diddy Combs' conviction on 2 federal sex crimes charges. Could he be pardoned by the President of the United States? You know, that is a question that came up a lot when we were doing the live streams of the Diddy trial every day on YouTube. I never really considered it as a real possibility, but I'll tell you what, now, based on current reporting, we may have to take this seriously. Oh, and in terms of relief for Diddy, we also have to get into his defense team's new memo that they filed arguing that his conviction should be thrown out, or at the very least, he should get a new trial. We're going to talk about that too. And by the way, let me tell you, we have an amazing guest who I'm going to be bringing on in a little bit, somebody who actually helped secure federal pardons for his clients, including from President Trump, and is an expert in criminal law, has been following this case from the very beginning. I'm going to bring him on in a little bit. But why do I say that we have to take pardons seriously now? Why? Well, TMZ has reported that President Donald Trump's administration has been talking to Diddy's legal team about a potential pardon, a forgiveness for a federal crime. It's enshrined in the Constitution. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, the president shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. And according to TMZ, his decision to pardon Diddy may be determined based on if Judge Arun Subramanian grants Diddy bail, which, by the way, we dedicated a whole sidebar to the other day. His team just filed a brand new letter with the court asking for him to be released. I broke it down, discussed all those arguments. But TMZ also has reported that the pardon decision could also come down to how Diddy is ultimately sentenced on October 3rd. And remember, he was acquitted of racketeering and sex trafficking, but he was found guilty of the 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, the Mann Act violations, namely transporting his exes, Jane and Cassie Ventura Fine, and men across state lines for the purposes of sex work. Each charge carries up to 10 years in prison, although I'll tell you, in a prior filing, the government was looking at roughly 4 to 5 year prison sentence. Mind you, this is before a pre-sentencing report has been prepared for the court, which does a full background check and analysis of Diddy's life and crimes. Now, the defense would definitely love time served and he gets out, or 21 to 27 months. And remember, at the time of sentencing, he'll have been locked up for a full year, so he'll get credit for that. And the judge has discretion here because there's no mandatory minimum when it comes to these charges. But anyway, as you know, we have been following this Diddy story since it broke, 2 years ago? And one of the reasons that we can do this, to really dive into these cases, is because of the amazing support that we get from our sponsors like Upside. Now, Upside is great. It is a free app that gets you cash back when you buy daily essentials. So I pump my gas, I can use Upside. I go out to lunch, I can use Upside. Get something at a convenience store, I can use Upside. And why not get cash back when I do all these things, right? This is real cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you transfer right into your bank account. So once you have the free Upside app, you claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. You pay as usual using a debit or credit card. You follow the steps on the app, you get paid. So to find out how much you can earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen. But make sure to use our promo code SIDEBAR because you'll get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. A pardon. Okay, really a pardon. Meaning Diddy, let's say he gets 5 years in prison. Trump pardons him, he's free to go? President Trump was asked about this a few months ago before the verdict. This was back in May. And he said when asked about a pardon for Diddy, I would certainly look at the facts. If I think somebody was mistreated, whether they like me or don't like me, it wouldn't have any impact on me. He used to really like me a lot, but I think when I ran for politics, that relationship busted up from what I read. I don't know, he didn't tell me that, but I'd read some little bit nasty statements in the paper all of a sudden. And Diddy had been photographed with Trump over the years. There was some sort of relationship there. President Trump even called him a good friend on a 2012 episode of his TV show, The Apprentice. The problem is, some comments Diddy made about Trump in recent years as Diddy really entered the political realm. There's a video where he's speaking to radio host Charlemagne saying, if Trump gets elected, I really do believe in my heart there'll be a race war. In another video on Revolt, he says, white men like Trump
Donald J. Trump. Whispers turned to confirmation. The former president was watching, speaking, calling. And then, just like that, Diddy's legal team made their move. A motion unlike anything they'd submitted before. Aggressive, sharp, laced with confidence. A full request for sentence suspension, filed under emergency judicial review. The basis? Political interference, media corruption, unconstitutional bias. And here's the kicker. They named Trump. Openly. Not as a supporter. As proof that this case had outgrown the courtroom and turned into a national political weapon. They leaned in. And that move changed everything. Inside the system, shockwaves spread like fire. Judges called meetings. Prosecutors went on defense. Journalists scrambled to reframe the narrative. Because now it wasn't just about what Diddy did. It was about what the courts did. Trump's name carried weight. Not legal, not official, but cultural. And in the court of public opinion, cultural pressure is currency. Diddy's lawyers held a press conference outside the courthouse.
Need to be banished. And by the way, you know who's not letting anyone forget this? Combs' rival 50 Cent. Took to social media recently, wrote, "See, Trump don't like S like this, buddy. You run your mouth too much. And Donald doesn't take well to disrespect and doesn't forget who chooses to go against him. While working tirelessly to make America great again, there is no room for distraction. He would consider pardoning anyone who was being mistreated, not Puff Daddy." And let me tell you, the idea of Trump pardoning Diddy is not getting a ton of love out there. Conservative commentator Megyn Kelly posted on X, "Trump should not pardon Diddy. He doesn't deserve it. He's a Trump hater. He's a woman abuser. MAGA is already upset over elites seeming to cover for each other. This would not help. GOP struggling with young female voters, most of whom will hate a Diddy pardon." And then you just had other random accounts like America First. What? He's actually considering this? Diddy is a depraved, abusive, sexual deviant who should be spending the rest of his life in prison. If Trump pardons him, he will get absolutely crushed. Who is advising him lately? It's looking like straight up sabotage at this point. There were other accounts that were not in favor of it, although there was this account. Milo posted on X, "Trump has no choice but to pardon Diddy after the government, led by James Comey's daughter Maureen, simply lost interest in Diddy's guilt the moment they secured his tapes incriminating powerful Democrats. The prosecution was a shambles. The trial was a farce." Now, I want to talk about if this is really going to happen, how it would happen. Also, if it really depends on bail and sentencing, then what are we talking about? And I have somebody who not only has been following the Diddy case from the very beginning, not only is a renowned criminal defense attorney, but actually has obtained federal pardons from the president, including from Donald Trump. By the way, for his clients Kodak Black and Lil Wayne, those were maybe the most notable. I'm joined by Bradford Cohen. Bradford, thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jess.
Now, before I even get into the pardon, okay, there was a bit of breaking news before we were going to come on. This is what I want to get your opinion on first. So Combs' defense team filed a memo in support of a motion for judgment of acquittal, or in the alternative, a motion for a new trial. And basically, I know you read through it, but basically the evidence, they would say, is insufficient to sustain that conviction. Their main arguments is really echoing what we've talked about a little bit when it came to the bail analysis, but that his prosecution, his conviction on these Mann Act prostitution charges is so unique. He wasn't profiting off of this business. All consenting adults were involved. The jury didn't find that there was any sex trafficking. They argued this isn't even prostitution per se, it's voyeurism, that the intent wasn't for people to travel for sex for money, but he paid them for their time. Everybody was having a good time. He makes a First Amendment argument that the freak-offs and the hotel nights were performances that were typically videotaped so they could watch them later on. It's just amateur pornography. And then finally makes the argument that he was prejudiced because of all the other evidence that came in to prove RICO or sex trafficking, and would have never came in if he was merely being prosecuted for prostitution, particularly the Intercontinental Hotel footage of him purporting to beat up Cassie Ventura Fine. And he says, at the very least, he needs a new trial. I hand it over to you. You think this is a successful argument?
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if it's going to be successful in the judgment of acquittal. I think the argument is interesting because everyone agrees he might be the only person in custody right now that has ever been convicted of the Mann Act. The Mann Act, and it gives a nice history of the Mann Act, and a lot of people don't understand what the Mann Act is, but the Mann Act was enacted because of a
Cameras everywhere, microphones in every direction, and the message was clear. We are not just appealing a sentence, we are confronting a system. They didn't ask for sympathy. They demanded scrutiny. They painted Diddy as a symbol, not of innocence, but of imbalance. And as wild as that sounded, the country was listening. Inside the prison, Diddy got the news, and he smiled. For the first time since the verdict, he had leverage. Not in dollars, not in contracts, in momentum. He walked differently after that. No slouch, no second guessing. The man who'd once ruled entertainment now carried himself like he was ruling again. Not over music, but over attention. And in the world of influence, attention is everything. From that moment on, the narrative was no longer controlled by prosecutors. It was in the hands of Diddy's legal team, and they were relentless. Day after day, they pushed through the courts with a fire that no one expected. They weren't trying to soften the image of their client. They weren't apologizing. They were swinging back. Hard. They called out media bias. They highlighted the political climate that surrounded the trial. They went after inconsistencies in the jury selection process.
A racist motivation that white women were being recruited by people of color to go across state lines and make money. So actually pimping those women across state lines and making money off of their sexual exploits. Obviously, that's not the case here. It's used so infrequently, it might have been a handful of people were actually charged with the Mann Act. No one in custody currently has ever been convicted of the Mann Act. So it's an interesting argument to say, hey, listen, this Mann Act, the original reason for it was racist. The original way that it was applied was racist. The way it's applied here is incorrect because he was not making any money from quote unquote pimping or getting these women across or men getting them across state lines. None of that was being done. This was all being done for entertainment purposes. So it's an interesting argument. I don't think this judge buys it. It might be interesting on an appeal, but I don't think the judge is going to give him a judgment of acquittal on those two counts based on the argument. Now, the more interesting argument to me, and it's their last argument for new trial, is that, listen, if you were just going to charge him with these two counts, which I originally said when I looked at all the evidence, and don't forget, I was getting calls during this trial from individuals that were telling me, hey, I have information that exonerates what they're saying against Sean Combs, essentially saying that Cassie and others were participating more than just having sex in a room. They were participating more than that. They were paying people, they were hiring people, they were sending me pictures even when Diddy wasn't around. They were asking me to come over even when Diddy wasn't around. These are what these witnesses were telling me, which is really Brady evidence. And I don't know if that was ever turned over. But the more interesting argument is that all these counts were charged. The only thing he was convicted of were the Mann Acts, and he probably wouldn't have been convicted of these Mann Acts but for all this other stuff that came in to try and prove these counts that they could not prove and did not have a basis for bringing.
Let me just challenge you on that, because this is a jury who didn't find that there was sex trafficking, and I can't confirm that they found him guilty of the Mann Act because of the hotel video or anything else. I mean, it seems to me that they might have convicted him on that based on the travel records, the payment receipts, all about that, not even necessarily allegations of violence. I mean, do you think that it was because of, let's say, the Intercontinental Hotel video that he was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution? It always felt to me that they proved that charge based purely on, the documents.
Well, I always feel like during a trial, whenever you get a guilty verdict on one of the counts or two of the counts out of 6 or 7, you think to yourself, is it because of these other things that they brought up, how bad he is, he's not a good guy, the video came out? Sometimes juries will split the baby, meaning, there's people that want to convict, there's people that don't want to convict, and they're like, okay, let's convict them on these acts. We can all agree we can convict him on these acts. He's not a good guy. He transported these men across state lines. Let's convict him on this. There's always going to be a question of that. The only way to not have a question of that, obviously, is when the jury comes out, someone gives an interview and says, hey, this is why we did it, is because, this tape was so.
They even claimed that the judge overseeing the case had previously ruled in favor of key prosecution witnesses in other unrelated trials. And behind all of it, looming like a storm on the horizon, was Trump. He wasn't just passively watching anymore. His social media team started dropping breadcrumbs. The system targets people they fear. When they come for you, they come hard. Certain cases need to be reopened. Period. The implications weren't subtle. Trump wasn't just echoing Diddy's defense. He was reinforcing it, weaponizing it, broadcasting it to millions of followers, pundits, and power players. Suddenly, cable news exploded with roundtable debates. Was Diddy railroaded? Was the sentence politically motivated? Was there truth to the claim that cultural icons were being used as public sacrifices to send a message? The courtroom wasn't quiet anymore. It was surrounded by cameras, by protesters, by fans, by critics, by media trucks and commentators and opportunists, all crowding around what used to be a closed case. Inside his cell, Diddy watched every frame. His lawyers gave him printed transcripts of interviews, legal updates, every article that mentioned his name. And each time he underlined the same word, reversal. Because now, it was on the table. Trump's allies began organizing a legal coalition. Former prosecutors, constitutional lawyers, civil liberties advocates. All of them ready to take aim at the sentence. Not the guilt, not the conviction, just the punishment. Their argument was surgical. They weren't saying Diddy was framed. They were saying Diddy was crushed too hard, too fast, too publicly. That the justice system needed to be recalibrated. That if Trump could be targeted, so could anyone. And that line? It stuck. Diddy's defense team filed another motion, this time with over 300 pages of documentation alleging prosecutorial overreach. Embedded in that motion were affidavits, expert opinions, and yes, references to public commentary made by the former president. This wasn't just about the law anymore. It was about pressure. And for the first time in months, the walls around Diddy didn't feel like a cage. They felt like a gate, about to swing open. That alone was enough to send shockwaves through every media outlet in the country. You don't call an emergency hearing unless the ground beneath the sentence is starting to crack. And it was cracking. Diddy's team walked into that courthouse like it was a stage. No apologies. No soft language. They spoke with force. They outlined every irregularity from jury selection to the press leaks that plagued the trial. They accused the prosecution of using Diddy's fame as a weapon and the media of turning the courtroom into a coliseum. But it wasn't just the arguments that made the room shake. It was the energy behind them. Because sitting quietly in the gallery, unannounced, unexpected, was a Trump-appointed former federal judge. He didn't speak. He didn't look around. He just sat there, watching. And everyone noticed. That presence alone sent a message. This isn't just about Diddy anymore. This is about something bigger. When the hearing ended, Diddy's attorneys left the courthouse and walked directly into a wall of cameras. They didn't flinch. They didn't hold back. Today, we exposed what really happened behind those doors, the lead attorney said. This is no longer about guilt or innocence. This is about the integrity of the system. And if that means working with people on every side of the political spectrum to correct a wrong, we'll do it. That was it. The floodgates opened. Media on both sides of the aisle ran the story. Not about Diddy, the criminal. About Diddy, the legal lightning rod. The case had evolved into something far more combustible than anyone expected. It was a referendum on fairness, punishment, and influence. And whether you hated Diddy or believed he deserved the sentence, suddenly everyone was asking the same thing. Was the justice system being used for spectacle? Trump leaned in harder. In a rally that weekend, he didn't mince words. They put that guy away to make a show. You know it. I know it. Everybody knows it, and maybe we're going to take a closer look. The crowd roared. And just like that, the fusion was complete. Diddy's fight for release wasn't just legal. It was political. It was cultural. It was national. Inside his cell, Diddy received a phone call. Not from Trump, but from one of Trump's closest attorneys. They didn't promise anything. They didn't guarantee results. They just said one thing: keep pushing. You're not alone anymore. And Diddy? He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just clenched the phone, sat back, and smiled. Because he knew the tide had turned. And now it wasn't a question of if he'd walk free. It was when.